Hey, everybody, welcome to Your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm your host, Jean Chatsky. Very glad to have you with us today. I want to start with a question for our retirees or even our soon to be retirees. When you are no longer defined by a job, who are you? Who are you becoming? That question is at the heart of today's discussion with my friend Suzy Welch, author of the new book, Becoming You, The Proven Method for Crafting Your Authentic Life and Career. I first crossed paths with Suzy, about 2 decades ago. Back then, she was introducing the world to her 10-10-10 decision making framework, which has helped so many of us, me, so many times think more clearly about the choices that shape our lives. I have been a fan of Suzy and her work ever since. Her new book builds on that foundation and helps people answer the question, what should I do with my life? And believe it or not, it's a question that you should be asking yourself throughout your life. We think of this as something we just do in our 20s, but as life has evolved, it's something that we need to ask on a continuous basis. Today, we're going to talk through Suzy's methodology for doing just that and how your money mindset can support the person you're becoming in retirement. But first, let me tell you just a little bit more about Suzy. She is an award-winning professor at NYU's Stern School of Business, a New York Times bestselling author, and one of the most trusted voices in leadership, purpose, and personal transformation. She is also the founder and CEO of Becoming You Labs and the host of Becoming You, one of America's top career podcasts. She's also a frequent guest on the Today Show and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. Suzy, welcome. Always so great to see you.
It is great to see you as well, Jean. We do go way back, and that makes me happy.
Well, Becoming You is interestingly not a book directly about finding happiness, but I think it's very related. It's about answering that question that I teed up. What should I do with my life? Can you walk us through what got you to the point where you knew you had to write this book, and why did you need to write it now?
Well, I had to write the book for myself. I was 60 years old, and I was suddenly not who I had been or who I thought I was. My whole life was turned upside down because I had one career in one life, and then I, in 2020, lost my husband. And even though we had seen it coming, even though we knew, I refused to engage in the process of thinking about who I would be afterwards. I mean, this is just everybody deals with grief a different way. And my husband urged me to be thinking about it. I just couldn't. Then it happened, and I was afterwards thinking, well, who am I now as I enter this third half of my life? I mean, I had a big, successful career. I had raised my children. I'd done a lot of stuff. But then all the rules changed and everything changed, and I had to decide who was I going to be in this third half. And like many of our listeners here today, I was not thinking only about finances. I had a safety net. I was at a place where I that was not going to be my primary concern. When I was figuring out what should I do with my life when I was 21, it was like, how am I going to pay the rent kind of thing? And now I was like, well, who am I really? And how do I actually, I have this third half, so to speak, left. How do I really craft this authentic life? How do I become the person I was born to be? What do I do? And I was, a lot of emotions were around that, but I thought the moment is now. And I thought that I had a methodology to figure this out. I'd been working on it for 15 years, and I was scrambling around. I went back to the Today Show in this period. Very graciously, they invited me back to be on the show. And I thought, yes, I love this, but this is not how I am going to spend the next 20 years. I think there might be something else for me. And so I had this methodology. I put it together. I went to NYU where I knew the team at the business school. And I said, look, I've got this class that's not just for young people, but for everybody about figuring out what your purpose is. People are always told to go live their purpose. We're told this constantly, go live your purpose, but nobody tells you how. Well, I think I have an answer to the how part. I've got a real methodology. It's not woo woo. It's 3 steps. You do it, and then you figure out what your purpose is. And they said, well, let's try it. And that was 4 years ago. And the next thing you know, the class became very popular because people were hungry coming out of the pandemic, but just in general, people were hungry. And after a year, we realized this is not just for my MBAs and the executive MBAs. I was teaching it to people up until their 50s in the executive MBA programs, but we were able to open it up to open enrollment. And I was able to say to the world, hey, I'm teaching this class at NYU. I'm going to teach it in 3 days. You're going to come out of it with your purpose. And we actually thought that that class was going to be filled with young people wondering what their purpose was. And guess who it was filled with? People who were about to go into retirement. People were like 50 or 60, said, okay, I gave this part of my life to the man, or I gave this part of my life to the stuff I had to do. Now what? And, they brought to the process the wisdom of their years. And they hungrily, in a way, it was very joyous for me as a teacher to teach it to people who were had the knowledge and the wisdom, and in some ways the freedom to make some choices for the first time about what life they were going to live. It's been spectacular in that way. So the impetus was that I needed it. When you're solving your own problem, you're pretty impassioned, right? And then I was able to bring it to many different audiences over the past 4 or 5 years, and it's been very, very rewarding.
How are those audiences different? How is the audience of people my age and your age different from the 20-somethings that are going through it?
Look, I gotta have my disclaimer is that I love my 20-somethings. I love them. But they're very young. And the older audiences are wise. They're wise. They understand that life has conflicts and trade-offs. I think when we're young, I did it too. You think, wait, I want to have fun and I want to be very rich. And why can't I do all those things at exactly the same time? But when you're talking to people who are in their 50s and 60s and older, and the oldest person I've taught becoming you to was 78 years old. And it was a great joy. They think, yeah, I get it. I have these values. They're in conflict. These things I want, and I'm going to figure out a way to work them out. They're not so angry at the world about trade-offs. I think that, look, it's a long journey to know who we are, but often people who are my age group are more tenderly aware of who they are. Now, the work of Becoming You involves getting to know yourself a whole heck of a lot better. We do a lot of self-discovery exercises to really dig deep and find out what your values and your aptitudes are and your interests. And we really dig deeply into that. But they sort of have a head start. At a certain point, you kind of begin. The world has told you who you are, and so they're further along in the process, and it makes it very rich.
I think we're also more aware of the time we have left. I love that you talk about it as the third half, because that makes it feel big and robust. But I think we're just aware we've experienced loss, that time is limited, and that it's so important to make the most of it.
You're so right. And that we have this one wild and precious life, and no one's going to live it for us. There's no magical, fairy that comes down and make it all perfect. It's on us. That sort of ownership of what our life is, and the agency that we have to have in making it happen. And as we enter the third half, we think, well, now's the moment. I've postponed a lot of stuff, and now is the moment. That's why I like the how part of it, because most people who are coming to it who are retired are like, yep, I get it. Now's the moment. Just tell me how to figure out the details.
Let's dig into the how. You mentioned it has it's a 3-part methodology. Let's go through them.
Okay. So Becoming You's premise is that your purpose, what you should be doing with your life, lives at the intersection of 3 data sets, if you will. And the first data set is your values, your deeply held beliefs. Now, by the way, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this because no one really knows their values. We mix them up with virtues. Values are 15 very distinct choices we make about how to live our lives. So the first data set is your values, and we'll talk about how we figure those out. The second data set are your aptitudes, what you're uniquely good at. We can be good at a lot of different things, but we are uniquely good at a bunch of smaller things. When I say what we're good at, I'm talking about our cognitive aptitudes, what we're wired to do. Are we generalists or specialists? Are we idea brainstormers or idea contributors? And we have these 8 big cognitive aptitudes. Which ones are our strengths? And then we also have aptitudes around our personality, because we can be really good at stuff in life, because of our personality, we're really bad at it. So Becoming You does a bunch of data gathering around the actual aptitudes of your brain and your personality. And the third set is what we're interested in. I call this data set your economically viable interests. And when my students are young, their economically viable interest sort of tends to focus on economically viable because a lot of them have debt. But the older the student, the less the pressing economic viable part of it is. I mean, everybody has economic needs. Everybody does, okay, unless they really planned wisely and so forth. But it's less of a presence. And so, what are you really interested in? We can spend a lot of our life doing stuff we're not passionately interested in. Now, listen, Becoming You is not about pursuing your passion. It's about, because I think other things matter. And those other things are what I've just mentioned, your values and your aptitudes. So we collect this data about those three. And then actually, we have a tool, and you put all that data into the tool. And it says, look, here are 3 or 4 things that would strongly suggest they are your purpose. And there's a reason why this class has the nickname, the class where everyone cries, because I have seen people get those results, and just the eureka of it, the sort of validation that having been seen, is very, very joyous. And sometimes people just need to put it all together in a process. I'm just maybe it's the academic in me. You really need a process.
So you have a tool called the Values Bridge,
Mm-hmm.
where people can, there's a free version and a paid version where people can assess their values
You will be
in
told
the
your values.
beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do people, I mean, you mentioned there are values and there are virtues, but why don't we get what our values are?
Jean, this is the $1,000,000,000 question to me. Of course, my area of study is values expression, so I couldn't care about something more. But look, uh, when I first started teaching Becoming You, I did these 7 exercises with my students to help surface what their values were. And I mean, I was 1 month in, and I thought, oh my, this is much harder than I thought, because people just kept on mixing up values with virtues. So virtues are generally accepted social constructs that we all should have more of: courage, kindness, fairness. And so a lot of times you ask people, what are your values? And they'll say, oh, definitely courage, kindness. And I'm like, yep, 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 yep. We all need more of those. Values are an interesting situation where it's well known in academia that there are a certain number of values. There's some disagreement among us. I think there's 15. Other experts think there's 19, but there's generally between 15 and 20. And these are choices about how we live our life. For instance, one value is scope. How big a life do we want? Do we want a very stimulating, very exciting life? We'll even take the chaos because we want to travel, we want to learn. Or do we want a life with lower scope, which is, kind of a controlled, more foreseeable, more calm and serene life, and with very little chaos in it? And that's a continuum, and it's a choice. Okay. I happen to be a high scope person, but somehow I managed to have 4 children who are all low scope. Okay. No judgment. Values are yours to have. I'm a total values agnostic. If you're not hurting anyone, your values are your values. All I say is, please know your values. So I tried a lot of different ways for my students to identify and speak about their values with a real language. And I found, wow, I was speaking one language because I understood and it studied values, but this language was not out there for the general population. And so I tried with my students some of the tests that existed, and I thought this is not working for them. And so finally, at the strong encouragement of my PhD thesis advisor, I created the Values Bridge, which is a tool. It takes 22 minutes, and it actually ranks your values for you from 1 to 15. Not only does it rank them, it tells you how much you're living them. So it says you have this value as number 1, and guess what? You're only living at 67%. We call that the authenticity gap. Or it says you're living at 100%. And it also tells you which ones of your values are in conflict with each other and how much. Okay, you've got family centrism and work centrism in conflict at a very high score, say of 98%. Okay, that's when those 2 values are in conflict. So I think I'm super proud of this tool. It's my life's work. We made it available to the public in May. 35,000 people have taken it so far, which is very
Including
exciting.
me.
Yes. What was your top value? Do you remember? I think
Um, I'm work centrism,
work
and
centrism.
I
Yeah.
gotta say that is something that I felt bad about my whole
Mm,
life until I talked to you, because I feel like we feel, or maybe it's a woman thing, that
mm,
we're supposed to be
mhm.
family first.
That's right.
And I'm very close with family, love my kids, but I
Yeah.
also really get a lot of satisfaction from working. And it's
Yes.
why I'm scared to give it up.
We're told so many things about what our values should be. People who love work and have high work centrism, as I do also, Jean, I've been called a workaholic my whole life. And I love to change the conversation and say, hey, guess what? There's this value called work centrism, which is how much you want to organize your life around work. And I have high work centrism and you have lower work centrism. And it doesn't make one of us right or wrong. We just have selected different values. And if you're not hurting anyone, I'm not going to pick on your values if you don't pick on mine. I mean, I think that I've seen this language of values vastly change people's lives because we're able to say 75% of my young students have as their number one value something that we call eudaimonia. That's self-care.
Mm.
Self-care. That's not that prevalent in our generation. Why? Because we were taught to postpone joy. And I myself don't have
And
very
suck
high
it up.
eudaimonia.
We were
Yeah,
taught to suck it
right.
up.
Joy is for later. You have to earn it. And I think it starts a very interesting conversation between parents and their kids, or employers and their employees, to say, I know that your top value is eudaimonia, self-care. Let me talk to you about why that was not a value for me. And maybe it should be more of a value, but it changes the conversation away from this accusatory stuff. And it allows us to talk about what we really value so that we can shape our lives to be fully living our values. That's an authentic life. And one of the great thing about being in retirement is you don't have to think quite so much about shaping your career around it. You can just shape your life around it. And I one time had a woman in one of my 3-day workshops that I do that are open to the public. And she was talking about herself at the beginning of class. And she said, look, I've never worked a day in my life and I don't plan to, but I sure want to know how to spend the next 20 years. And she was able to say, look, here are my values and here are my aptitudes. Here's what I'm very, very good at. And here's what interests me. I still have a purpose. It's not around work. It's around just living.
How do people get to the second two factors, to the what I'm really good at
Yeah.
and to the what I actually have an interest in? Because you've said many people live these false lives for years,
Yes.
and I think it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy in
Yeah.
some degree, right? You do
Yeah.
these things for long enough, you think that's what you've got to keep doing.
That's right. It becomes almost a habit and you can't see the way out of it. I mean, I call these the 4 horsemen of life destruction. There's expectations. We have to do it this way. That's the first one. There's expedience. It's just easier. I can't take all the change. I can't blow it up. We'd have to move. Then there's events. Sometimes just life gets in the way. Somebody gets sick or somebody that you love gets laid off and you have to deal with it. And events kind of take you away from your real life. And then there's this economic security, which I just have to keep on earning this amount of money. But a lot of forces take us away from us living our authentic life. So you ask, though, how do you figure out what your aptitudes are? How do you figure out what you're really, really good at? And there are great tests for it. The best test, I think, is one that's called uscience.com. I have no skin in this game. I didn't develop it. I didn't need to because it was so good. And you can get it online. It's a little pricey. It's $50, but there's not a free version of it. So I mentioned that. My students take it. I also myself have developed 2 tests to help you figure out your aptitudes, and they're on my website, SuzyWelch.com. So I think that the nice thing about our listeners here today is as they've lived a lot of life, if they just ask people who know them well, hey, what am I particularly good at? What am I uniquely good at? Oftentimes people will say, you know what, you're just super good at knowing solutions without complete information, or you're very good at making strangers feel welcome, or you're very good at teaching people things. I mean, I think that at a certain point, you've lived enough life that if you can put together sort of a kitchen cabinet of 5 people who you can trust to tell you the truth, you can just ask them and
I,
they'll tell you.
Yeah, I think that's true. I'm flashing on the bear. I don't know if you watched the bear,
Oh, please. Of
Suzy,
course I
but
do. Of
of course
course
you
I
watch
do.
the bear. Everybody watches the bear. But when Carmi sends Richie to Ever to
Yeah.
learn how to be of service in hospitality, it's because he saw in Richie that Richie was good with people.
Yes.
Sometimes the people around you see things
Yes.
that you don't see yourself. And then the third factor, what we
I
actually are interested in, can we just allow ourselves to tell us that?
Yes, let me just say one last thing about that observation you had about our own aptitudes. I want to just caution that you can't trust yourself. You really do need to ask other people. There's very interesting data, a great research. I will not bore you with all the academic details of it that shows that we are the worst judge of ourselves. So if you say, okay, what am I really, really good at? we edit ourselves. We often underestimate ourselves. And when it comes to actually kind of leadership, we overestimate ourselves. The data is very clear. So I would say do the work of asking other people, hey, look, let's just, no judgment, no shade. Tell me what the three things you think I'm very, very good at, and ask a couple of people that. Okay. I also have this one little trick, which is that I asked one time, I was trying to find hacks for this. And I said, ask all the people around you, what's the first word that comes to their mind when they see your name pop up on their phone screen? And it's interesting, sort of like, and they can't just say your name. They have to say like love, or like my wonderful assistant says when she sees the phone ring and it's me, she thinks to herself, machine. And this is not a, look, I work all the time, and
Right.
it told me a lot about what I'm good at, which is I forge through, Gene. I forge through, and that is one of my aptitudes. Is I'm for better for worse, kind of indefatigable. So anyway, so that's another hack on that. So then for interests, again, we have tests for this in Becoming You, and Becoming You Labs have developed these tests because my younger students have sort of shockingly have closed apertures. Okay. They get on conveyor belts. They're told in school, go to banking, go to consulting, go into retail, go to this or that. And there's 135 industries. There's 12 mega trends, and they have to. My job there with the youth is to pull open their apertures and say, guess what? There's more to life than banking and consulting, and some of it's very, very interesting if you just learn about it. I think for people in their third chapter, their third half, as I am. It's allowing your curiosity to take you where you're interested. Like, I have a really good friend who's 1 year older than I am. I'm 65. She's 66, and she's discovered AI, and she's just become this AI queen. I mean, she's just takes every class in it that she can. She's thinking about starting an AI company. She's retired. She allowed herself just to explore what drew her, and to take off the boundaries about what people our age should be interested in. You may have sort of all your life just thought to yourself, wouldn't it be cool to work in animal rescue? Yeah, it would be cool. Go check it out. I mean, it's about unediting ourselves. It's about letting go of thinking that there's only a couple things you can be interested in. I mean, I love stories of people who, in their third half, have just discovered or rediscovered what their interests and passions are because they let themselves do it.
You mentioned economically viable. We're at our heart a money show, and a recent survey by the Alliance for Lifetime Income found that 80% of Americans say that they do fear running out of money in retirement. For people who are in this group,
Mhm.
how do you pair this methodology with the ability to continue to earn money as long as possible? Or do you think it's possible to do two tracks, to earn money on one and find yourself on the other?
The statistic you cite is absolutely accurate in my experience. And I have had the experience of hundreds of people who are entering their third half coming to Becoming You because they need to come up with a new career. Their career has ended. It's been ended by the organization, or they've just aged out of it. It's like people don't stay in these certain jobs after a certain age. And they say, I'm here because I have to keep working. I don't have to keep working as much as I've been working because I have some kind of nest egg and I've got some kind of planning, but I need to find a new job and a new career at age 60. Help me out with that. And I say, well, you're in the right place. This is a perfect methodology for you because you know what you're good at. And now let's take a good close look at your values. And then let's find out with the tool, the Becoming Summit, what careers might accommodate you, because you may not even know these careers exist. And there are certain companies that are actually looking for people in our demographic, exactly because we are in our demographic. We're very reliable. We have a certain understanding of how the world works. And so I think that it's not uncommon for me to bump into somebody who says, yeah, I got to work, maybe not as much, maybe 40% as much as I used to, but that's still work and that's still a career. What's the new relevant career for you? It may be something totally new. I mean, I love stories. We had somebody who came to one of my 3-day workshops, and she'd had a long career as a doctor. And she had been a surgeon, but the time had come for her to leave the operating room because for a bunch of different physical things, she'd really hurt her back, and the standing was no longer viable. And she had spent her money along the way on her children, and she didn't have a lot, and she needed to find out a new career. And when we took a good hard look at her values and her aptitudes, and what kind of jobs had growth, that would match her economic needs, she's now a counselor and a success counselor in colleges, for students who are looking for, their, what career they should go into. She just had so much wisdom, and she had this value that had been completely repressed her whole life, a value we call non-sibi, which is this impulse to be helping people. And of course, as a surgeon, you help people, but you don't really know them. She was a ear, nose, and throat surgeon. She didn't actually even know her patients. They sort of came into the operating room. She did the work, and off they went. She saw them once after they came out. But she had so much non-sibi, so much altruism she wanted to express, and we were able to craft a career for her that actually allowed her to do that literally from 9 to 5 every single day. And she had the aptitudes as well. So it was very exciting. She's happily doing it now.
That's fantastic. Do you
Yeah.
find that stories like this are abundant? I mean, I want people to feel
Oh,
hopeful
uh,
about finding work in this last half, this third half, because we
yes.
do hear about how challenging it can be.
It is challenging if you don't have a methodology. I mean, I'm sorry to toot my own horn here, and I mean that I can't help myself, but because I so believe. But the problem is when we know we have to have a new career and we really want one and we're ready for one, and maybe it's not the first career we had, but it could be the best career we had. And then you say, well, where is it? And who's there to help you? Who's there to say, let's figure some stuff out? Okay. And so these stories are abundant, Gene. People should have hope. I've seen so many people launched into like exactly what they typically say is, why didn't I do this my whole life? Um, and I can't believe I came to this so late. And my line always is, "You're just beginning. You're just beginning. Look at me. I found my purpose at age 60. I did." And my purpose ended up being helping people find their purpose. Very meta. But I found it when I was 60, and I thought, oh, okay, I love my careers that came before. I was a broadcast journalist. I did a bunch of different things. I wrote books, but man, this is it. I mean, my kids are like, oh, mom, when are you going to have a vacation? I was like, I don't want a vacation. I'm finally doing the work I wanted to do. And I think you can enjoy it with a kind of poignancy at our age, at my age, because you think, oh, wow, I found it. I'm there. It's great.
So we've had this wide-ranging conversation. If you had to distill it down and give three pieces of advice to people who are at that point that you were at, what would you tell them?
Oh, quite directly figure out who you are, so who you are standing still, so that you can know which direction to run when you start moving again. And who you are, it sounds like a very big assignment, but it's not. It's a matter of knowing what your values are. That's precious data. You've got to know what you're uniquely good at and what calls you emotionally and intellectually. Because the second piece of advice I would give is that it's better to be the author of your life than the editor. And we spend our whole lives being the editor of our life. There's a lot of stakeholders. I used to say to my kids, there's a lot of stakeholders in Suzy Incorporated. There were my kids, there was my husband, there were my bosses, there were my parents, there were my sisters, I mean, my friends, my dogs are stakeholders in Suzy Incorporated, for goodness sake. And I was the editor of my life. They were all writing the story and I was editing it. And then I realized, wait, I can put that pen in my hand and I can be the author myself. And I think it's kind of the fastest route to joy. Joy is hard won, but I think that we get there faster when we're the author rather than the editor.
And I would just add, as a third piece of advice, the book is excellent, and it's really a step-by-step methodology. It takes you, if you're looking for the
Yes.
tactics in this process, it takes you through. So it's well worth a read. Suzy, if
Thank
we're
you.
looking for information about you, about the class, are you going to teach the 3-day class again?
I'm teaching it September 12th, 13th, and 14th in New York City. I'm very excited to be doing that again. I have a few scheduled coming up, but that's the next one in September. So I love teaching them because I meet people from around the world in all different stages of life. It's actually really fun.
And where should we go to find more?
So if I find out
SuzyWelch.com?
anything, go to SuzyWelch.com, SUZY, Welch.com. And you can also, I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram mainly and also LinkedIn. So if you, I never stop talking about this stuff there. And those, so if you need to hear more, that's a good place. But SuzyWelch.com has everything.
As well, you shouldn't. And if you're looking for more information to help you navigate retirement, please check out our website at protectedincome.org. Sign up for our newsletter. You can do that very easily at protectedincome.org/subscribe. Suzy, thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure.
Jean, what a great opportunity to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. See you, everybody.